Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Okay.
Red Sea, armed.
Let's learn, guys. Original link to the video, top of the description. Hope everyone's doing well. My name's Connor. If you're new, Caspian Report, preemptive like. Why Iran is so hard to defeat. Let's find out.
Conflict in Gaza, Houthi rebels in the Red Sea, armed conflict in Gaza, skirmishes in South Lebanon, Iran and its proxies are working tirelessly to strike at the heart of American and Israeli interests. From lethal attacks on US forces in Jordan to precision strikes at Israel, the goal is clear: the complete expulsion of American influence from the Middle East. Some lawmakers in the West are now looking for chinks in the armor to strike back. However, Iran has held roughly the same borders for over 500 years. It has fought nearly all superpowers at their respective zeniths and lived to tell the tale. Think of the Romans, the Arabs, the Turks, the Russians, and the British, to name a few. Quite simply, fighting Iran head-on is a terrible idea. It could backfire disproportionately.
I mean, look at Afghanistan, Vietnam. I mean, if those were difficult and disastrous in the end, then what do you think is going to happen with Iran? Clearly, going to war with a country, even if you defeat them militarily at first, that's like 3% of the job done. Whereas if you want to subdue it, that's the almost impossible part. And again, if it didn't work in those other areas by really strong powers, what chance does anyone have in really
not only does
dominating it?
Idea. It could backfire disproportionately. Not only does the country operate an extensive network of Shia military proxies, but even inside its own boundaries, a conventional invasion would be a Herculean task. Tehran has constantly demonstrated its ability to withstand invasions, making it almost impossible to subjugate. But why is that? What makes Iran so tough? Is it just mountains, or is there more to it? To find out, we need to dive deep into what makes the country tick and how it evolved to its current configuration. We need to look more closely at the surface because geography reveals the soul of a nation.
Yeah, obviously really tall mountains. I'm not sure how tall. I'm sure taller than what we have in the US, even the Rockies. And then a really long coastline on a super important body of water. Okay.
Today's video is sponsored by Conflict of Nations, a free online strategy game.
If you're interested in this, guys, and you learned it here, make sure, original link, top of the description, make sure to use their promo codes and links.
Where you choose a real country to lead into a modern global conflict. Up to 128 other players are moving their units across the map in real time, so to win, you need to form alliances and construct all types of units, including tanks, jets, and submarines. Conflict of Nations is a huge game. It can take weeks for a game round to complete, which makes logistics as necessary as tactics. The key to victory is to think ahead and build alliances. What I like most about the game is that you can play with the same account on both PC and mobile. That convenience sets it apart from other games. Using our link below, you will get an exclusive gift, 13,000 gold and 1 month of premium subscription for free. The offer is only available for 30 days, so get started sooner rather than later.
Good. All set. Sorry, guys. Fortress of Mountains.
Iran is defined by its mountains. Its topographic peaks form the country's walls and encase its cities, with the most important being the Zagros Mountains. To the southwest, the Zagros gently slope down into Iraq, and to the north, they form an almost impassable border with Turkey. The only section of the western border not guarded by topography is protected by the marshes, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers converge. Looking north, the Alborz Mountains provide another natural border, while a ribbon of lesser peaks curls around Iran's east, marking the borders with Afghanistan and Pakistan.
So is this area like, I imagine like Florida Everglades, just miles and miles of just like low-lying water and reeds everywhere? I would imagine that'd be nightmare for logistics.
The sea forms the final wall of the castle. Iran's coastline stretches nearly 2,500 kilometers and is split roughly between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. Bandar Abbas, Iran's most crucial port, stands sentinel midway along the Strait of Hormuz, an artery through which about a fifth of the world's petroleum pulses. Concurrently, the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's chief geopolitical leverage. Should Tehran decide to make good on its threat and disrupt the flow...
Guys, so even without like the USA and Israel in the Middle East, Iran and Saudi Arabia don't like each other, right? And so it would be, the conflict in that case would be kind of Iran and Iran allied powers in the area versus Saudi and Saudi allied powers. I guess those would be the two big players. And the United Arab Emirates, I believe, I don't think there's some weird extra border that, I'm not sure where Oman, but so you'd have both of them kind of controlling, I think they're more Saudi aligned, controlling one side of this super important strait, right?
Currently, the Strait of Hormuz is Iran's chief geopolitical leverage. Should Tehran decide to make good on its threat and disrupt the flow of fossil fuels, the global economy would be shaken to its core. This then gives Iran substantial bargaining power when negotiating with its peers. However, when left at peace, the strait confines Iran to land power since it lacks a competing port along the Gulf of Oman that can rival Bandar Abbas. In all, geography not only serves as a boundary, but also cradles the majority of Iran's 90 million citizens. Enclosed within its borders, the Kavir and Luth deserts form vast barren plateaus that cluster the populace within a highland belt. Historically, this topographical anomaly has made Iran incredibly tough to subjugate. However, like so many things in Iran, reality cuts both ways. While the mountains protect Iran, they also contain it. Westward expansion tends to lead to conflicts with powerful empires. Think of the Russians, the Turks, the Arabs, and the Romans before it. And when Iran does somehow manage to expand westward, it usually grants autonomy to the conquered territories. This strategy is mainly due to the logistics of mountainous terrain, which makes policing distant regions both challenging and expensive. Gerrymandered autonomy is a strategy as old as the Persian Empire, which maintained its culturally diverse territory by granting self-governance to its vassals and client states. Fast forward to today, and we see a similar pattern. Iran's power projection now relies on a network of primarily Shia proxy groups.
It seems like their strategy is working pretty well. Since I think, Iran-Iraq war, obviously giant discontent between these two, but it seems like Iraq has really swung towards being more pro-Iran than, pro-Saudi or anything else, right? And then you have the Pakistan, although they had some trouble in the past few months, I think. I forget how long ago it was when they were both kind of shooting missiles into each other. They were trying to get possible terrorist groups. The word terrorist is loaded one, as always. But you have pretty weak countries in the north, in Turkmenistan, a friendly Iraq, a pretty friendly Pakistan. I'm not sure about Iran-Turkey relations. I think they're pretty friendly with Azerbaijan. And so even aside from its immediate borders, it seems to be pretty well cushioned on all sides. regardless of
Power
how well it's
projection now
defended
relies
itself.
on a network of primarily Shia proxy groups, each operating with varying degrees of independence. While these proxies are not direct conquests, they serve as extensions of Iranian influence. For a deeper dive into this topic, be sure to check out our previous video, where we explore Iran's use of proxy states in greater detail. Iran's mountains make fully assimilating its many diverse cultures and peoples exceedingly tricky. The towering peaks create pockets of isolation where communities cling to their unique languages, traditions, and identities. So, while its mountains shield Iran from foreign domination, they also complicate the formation of a unified, centralized government. Ethnic Persians make up just 55 to 60% of the population, with the rest comprising Azerbaijanis, Balochis, Kurds, Arabs, Turkmens, and many others. The clustering of these ethnic groups in specific regions fuels calls for autonomy and separatism. Historically, Iran has granted autonomy to these groups, but the centralization of power in Tehran led to the corrosion of their political freedoms. Consequently, a centralized Iran has evolved into an authoritarian state. Tehran must constantly grapple with calls for autonomy and independence by its ethnic groups. For example, during the Islamic Revolution of 1979, Kurds, Turkmens, and Arabs sought to secede from Iran, while Azerbaijanis aimed for more self-governance. Although these movements were suppressed, they underscored the ethnic volatility within Iran. Now, while reviewing these internal mechanisms, one disclaimer needs explaining. In a more compassionate world, there wouldn't be a need to examine ways to undo one another, but geopolitics is precisely like that. Exploiting a country's multi-ethnic population may be morally questionable, but it is a weakness nonetheless. And there are those who have no problems getting their hands dirty. Policymakers study, plan, and act on such exploits. So, regardless of morals, the fact remains that ethnic tensions drive much of Iran's foreign policy. Many of Iran's minority groups share deep-running ties with their kin abroad. Azerbaijanis in the northwest share close cultural and linguistic ties with Azerbaijan. The Kurds have connections with Kurdish populations in Iraq and Turkey. To the south, roughly 1.6 million Arabs, who predominantly inhabit Iran's oil-rich province of Khuzestan, share ties with various Arab communities across the Middle East. Meanwhile, in the southeast, the Balochis have strong ties with their counterparts in Pakistan, with both groups fighting their respective overlords. These cross-border ethnic solidarities complicate Iran's bilateral relations with its surroundings.
You'd think that would help Iran-Pakistani relations. The fact that that both countries respectively don't like their own respective, is it Baloch? Insurgencies, if you want to call it that, or just ethnic regions.
Solidarities complicate Iran's bilateral.
If I'm saying anything wrong, guys, please let me know in the comments.
These cross-border ethnic solidarities complicate Iran's bilateral relations with its surroundings. Tehran is consistently wary of its neighbors, believing they would back separatist groups aiming for unification, particularly during periods of national instability. The ever-looming threat of breakaway regions foretells disaster. Such disintegration would not only shrink Iran's territorial size and population, but also severely dent its tax revenue. Moreover, the loss of the Khuzestan oil fields would plunge Tehran into a financial abyss. Oil is the cornerstone of Iran's economy, accounting for a staggering 24% of GDP growth in 2023. Its loss would be cataclysmic. Without its minority regions, Iran would lose its geopolitical clout. The rump Persian majority state would likely be landlocked and stripped of its mountainous borders, leaving it exposed security-wise. While this worst-case scenario of Iran's fragmentation may seem far-fetched, it has happened numerous times in history. In more recent years, Iran's adversaries have sought to exploit its ethnic and religious fault lines. Israel has strengthened its ties with Azerbaijan and shown interest in supporting Azerbaijani separatist movements within Iran. Similarly, some have linked Saudi Arabia to efforts aimed at fomenting Arab separatism.
Israel and Azerbaijan. Seems like such a strange combo. I'd like to learn more about that.
Azerbaijani separatist movements within Iran. Similarly, some have linked Saudi Arabia to efforts aimed at fomenting Arab separatism in the Khuzestan province.
Okay, maybe I was wrong about good Azerbaijan-Iranian relations.
A significant Arab population that the Khuzestan province, a region with a significant Arab population that borders Iraq. Since Iran is nearly impossible to neutralize from the outside, adversaries like the United States and Israel see separatism as the only option to neutralize the threat that is Iran. However, while the threat of Balkanization exists, Iran's lack of homogeneity may not be the Achilles heel its adversaries long for. During the Iran-Iraq War, Iraqi propaganda emphasized Iran's ethnic and sectarian divides, portraying the Iranian government as Persian chauvinist oppressors of minorities. The aim was to stoke ethnic tensions and separatist sentiments within Iran. Saddam hoped that Iran's Arab minority, particularly in the oil-rich Khuzestan province, would take up arms and support the Iraqi invasion. They did not. Iraq also supported Kurdish separatist groups like the Kurdistan Democratic Party and the Patriotic Union of Kurdistan in their fight against the Iranian government, hoping their insurgency would weaken Iran. This ploy had some success initially. It forced the country to relocate resources to suppress the Kurdish rebellion. Yet, Saddam's plan ultimately failed and the war ground to a stalemate.
I heard that was a horrific war, and I think chemical weapons were used by the Iraqis, I think.
The fabric of society is based on shared values, common goals, and communal experience. These attributes foster trust, cooperation, and mutual support among its members. However, sometimes nations can achieve the same result by creating the us versus them narrative. This dichotomy creates a sense of belonging and solidarity within each group while fostering separation and sometimes hostility towards the other group.
Fear.
During the Iran-Iraq War, Tehran heavily pushed Iranian nationalist rhetoric that put the war as a fight between Shia and Sunnis. It's the reason why Saddam's ploy failed. But to grasp the efficacy of this strategy, a glimpse into history is warranted. In 1501, Ismail I was crowned Shah in Tabriz, heralding the dawn of the Safavid Empire. Originating from the region that roughly corresponds to modern-day Azerbaijan, the new Shah went on to conquer a vast empire. But Ismail is seen as the founder of modern Iran not because he amassed territory, but because he declared Twelver Shia Islam as the state religion of his empire. This decision unified diverse
Twelver?
State religion amassed territory, but because he declared Twelver Shia Islam as the state religion of his empire. This decision unified diverse ethnic and linguistic groups under one religious identity and distinguished the Safavid dynasty from surrounding Sunni powers, like the Ottoman and Mughal empires. Promoting Shia Islam solidified Ismail's control, legitimized his rule, and laid the foundation for modern Iran Iran's religious and cultural identity. Interestingly, Ismail himself was an ethnic minority belonging to the Azerbaijani faction, and so did his court and massive army, which proves the point that religious unity comes before ethnic loyalty. Either way, for the first time in the post-Islamic period, all of Iran's ethnic groups came together in agreement. Today, Shia Islam remains the dominant branch in Iran, with 90 to 95% of the population identifying as such. This religious homogeneity, with its shared beliefs, rituals, and religious practices, helps foster a sense of unity among the various ethnic groups. But that's not all. By promoting Shia Islam, Tehran achieves not only national unity and social cohesion, but also gains strategic leverage in places where Shia communities form a majority. So, for the Iranian state, Shia Islam lights two candles with one flame. Yet, Iran is not entirely Shia.
Makes sense.
Pockets of Sunni Muslims dot the periphery. Their ideological beliefs stand in stark contrast to those of the Shia majority. Despite attempts at integration and assimilation, many Sunnis view separatism as the only viable path forward.
Is comparing it to Protestantism and Catholicism a fair comparison, or is it just too different?
Among these dissenting voices, the Sunni Balochis are the most compelling faction. Their cultural and religious distinctiveness sets them apart from the Persian Shia majority. Several Balochi separatist factions are already actively waging an insurgency against Tehran, albeit at a relatively low intensity. Conversely, Iran may have overplayed its Shia card.
What about Pakistan and like Malaysian Muslims and Indonesian Muslims, Bangladesh Muslims? Are they Sunni or Shia, or is there something altogether different?
Following the Islamic Iran may have overplayed its Shia card in the years following the Islamic Revolution. Even government studies show that Iranians have become less religious than before. When all the noise quiets down, faith is often unappreciated when it's imposed on people. Simply put, Shia Islam is steadily losing its cohesive power if it hasn't already. So, to keep a hold on power regardless, Tehran employs good old-fashioned brute force. It does not tolerate dissent, and when defiance arises, the security apparatus tightens its grip. Dissidents are crushed, arrested, or sent to the gallows. When mass anti-government protests erupted across Iran in 2022, the largest in nearly 4 decades, Tehran's tools of suppression kicked into full gear. State media went into overdrive, portraying protesters in provinces with large ethnic minorities as terrorists and separatists to discredit the movement. Meanwhile, hundreds of protesters
the word terrorism now just like, yeah, I don't believe anyone ever again on the word terrorism. It's just like so it's just
arrested, and Iranian security forces deployed in full force to brutally crack down on the demonstrations. Ultimately, despite the size and scale of the protests, Iran was able to subdue them. Any foreign-backed separatist movement would inevitably face similar constraints when facing Iran's media apparatus and security forces. It would be an uphill battle from start to finish. Nevertheless, those seeking to harm Iran might consider balkanization as the only viable strategy short of war. America and Israel, for instance, see Iran's ethnic minorities as cracks in the armor. Would a foreign-backed separatist proxy conflict truly work? Probably not, but some lawmakers might think it's worth the effort regardless. This is also the reason why the Iranian leadership does not not embrace democracy wholeheartedly. Here's the kicker. Psychological operations are rarely ever so apparent. The clergy in power believes that Western powers seeking to push Iran toward disintegration want to package their aims in a virtuous ideology.
There's an uncomfortability aspect when I can't help it. Like, I don't want to give credence or give legitimacy to a power using brutal tactics, right? But, okay, I also feel weird as a country that wants to see the downfall of them go into those tactics and amplify them and then be like, see, look at what they're doing. And so if I'm Iran and I'm the head of Iran and I want to keep control, it's kind of like a catch-22. It's like you either be a authoritarian state, or the or should be you allow people to choose freely, but you have this other power that you see as an enemy that is going to exploit that. And so it feels weird, although it should, a straightforward way would be like, yeah, authoritarianism isn't good. Of course it's not. But if you have a power that's your enemy that's going to exploit that, it's weird. It's a weird feeling. Of course, I feel like people should be able to choose democratically, but there are going to be states that are going to take advantage of you. And so when you kind of curl up and act authoritarian, I feel like it's kind of our fault in a way. Am I going too far there?
Such as liberal democracy. Tehran believes that by embracing liberal ideas,
it's like they should allow them to have more liberal ideas, but we should stay out of it. That's what I'm trying to say. Because,
its cohesion would drift apart within a few generations. Without authoritarianism or theocracy holding it together, Iran's minority regions would likely employ liberal rights to pursue their own identities and, in time, separate from Iran altogether. Taken together, Iran is stuck doing the same thing over and over again. This is not a story with a happy ending. Iran must choose one of two pains: the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. I've been your host Shirvan from Caspian Report. If you approve of what we do, please leave a comment and mayhaps share the video. In any case, thank you for your time and Sahol.
A comment for the algorithm. As always. Very interesting. Best way I heard about Iran. It is twice the size of Iraq, mountainous as Afghanistan, and has nationalism of Russia. The fact that Iran has problems occupying itself means that invading Iran would be invading Afghanistan on steroids. Yeah, I look at Vietnam, look at Afghanistan. Beating someone initially in a military conflict is a lot easier than what comes after and your intentions afterwards. So you can beat them in a military conflict, fine, but you're either going to have to let it roll the dice and just see whatever comes out of it, or you're going to have the impossible task of trying to manipulate stuff yourself, which, as you can see in Afghanistan, doesn't work. Very interesting video. Love you all. Hope you're all doing well. Would appreciate any comments down below. If I said something wrong, or if you can answer any of my questions, would really appreciate it. You guys are always awesome with that. Hopefully, I'll see you next video. Bye, guys.